The dust had barely settled on the last man who tried to cheat Finn Beaumont at cards when the pregnant woman walked into his life asking for something he thought had died with his childhood: fairness. She stood in the doorway of his ranch house outside Council Bluffs, Iowa, one hand pressed against the small of her back, the other cradling the swell of her belly beneath a faded calico dress. The July heat of 1878 shimmered around her like a halo, and Finn had to squint against the late afternoon sun to make out her features properly. Dark blonde hair escaped from beneath a dusty bonnet, framing a face that was equal parts determined and exhausted. "Are you Finn Beaumont?" Her voice carried a clarity that surprised him, given how worn she looked. "Depends on who is asking." Finn remained in the doorway, blocking her path. At 29, he had learned not to trust strangers, especially ones who showed up unannounced. His hand rested casually near the revolver at his hip, though he doubted this woman posed much of a physical threat. "My name is Felicity Richardson. I heard in town you might need someone to help around your ranch." She shifted her weight, and Finn noticed she was favoring her left leg. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend a garden, and I know my way around livestock. I am a hard worker and I do not complain." Finn's eyes dropped to her belly, then back to her face. "You are about 7 months along if I had to guess. What kind of fool do you take me for?" "You will be laid up within weeks." 6 months, she corrected, lifting her chin. "And I have 2 more months of good work in me before the baby comes. After that, I will need perhaps a week to recover, and then I can manage light duties while caring for the child. I am stronger than I look." He almost laughed at her audacity. Almost, but something in her eyes stopped him. They were gray-blue, like storm clouds over the Missouri River, and they held no trace of deception or desperation. Just a calm, rational assessment of her own capabilities. "You got a husband?" Finn asked bluntly. "I am a widow." The words came out flat, rehearsed. "He died 4 months ago. Family, none that matter." Her jaw tightened. "I need work, Mr. Beaumont. I need a place to stay and earn my keep until I can figure out what comes next." "I heard you have been struggling since your ranch hand quit last month. I heard you let your housekeeper go because you could not afford to pay her anymore. I may not be able to do everything a full ranch hand could do, but I can do more than nothing, and I will not ask for much in return." Finn studied her for a long moment. She was right about his situation. His ranch hand, Pete, had left to try his luck in the Black Hills gold rush, and his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had moved to Omaha to live with her daughter. He had been managing alone for 5 weeks now, and the place was starting to show the neglect. Laundry piled up. Meals consisted of whatever he could throw together quickly, and he had been letting chores slide that really should not be ignored. Still, hiring a pregnant widow seemed like inviting trouble. "What did you have in mind for payment?" he asked, curious despite himself. "Room and board." She met his gaze steadily. "A cabin or a room, food and safety. In exchange, I will handle all the household chores and whatever else I can manage. When the baby comes and I need help, we can work something out then. But until that happens, I will earn my keep." "That is not a fair trade," Finn said, surprising himself with his honesty. "You would be working yourself ragged for just food and shelter. That is practically indentured servitude." For the first time, something like surprise flickered across Felicity's face. "You are concerned about fairness." To me, the way she said it made Finn's chest tighten uncomfortably. "I am not a slaver, Miss Richardson." "Mrs. Richardson," she corrected automatically, then seemed to reconsider. "Though I suppose it hardly matters now. And I am not suggesting slavery, Mr. Beaumont. I am suggesting a practical arrangement that benefits us both." Finn shook his head. "If you are going to work for me, it needs to be fair. You do half the chores, I do the other half. We split things down the middle. You still get room and board, but I am not going to work you like a pack mule just because you are desperate." Felicity stared at him as if he had just spoken in a foreign language. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment she seemed unable to formulate a response. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper. "Split the chores down the middle. That is what I said. You would do half the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry." "I can already do some of that," Finn said, feeling defensive now. "I have been managing on my own. I am just saying if you are here, we split it fair. You are in no condition to be doing everything, and I am not going to take advantage of someone in your situation." Something shifted in Felicity's expression. The careful neutrality cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Her eyes grew bright, and she pressed her lips together hard, as if physically restraining words that wanted to escape. "When do I start?" She finally managed. "You can have the cabin out back," Finn said, gesturing toward the small structure visible past the main house. "It needs cleaning, but it is sound. Has a stove, a bed, and a table. You can settle in today if you want. We can start dividing up chores tomorrow morning." Felicity nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She had walked 7 miles from Council Bluffs, her feet aching and her back screaming, expecting to have to beg or bargain or possibly worse to secure a position. She had prepared herself to be taken advantage of, to be treated as disposable labor, to have her desperation used against her. Instead, this rough-looking cowboy with sun-weathered skin and pale green eyes was offering her something she had not experienced in years: fairness. The word felt foreign in her mouth, like a language she had once known but had almost forgotten. Finn led her around the back of the main house, a solid 2-story structure that had seen better days but was clearly well built. The cabin sat about 50 yards away, nestled under a large cottonwood tree. It was smaller than she expected, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, but it had glass windows and a real door with a latch. "I will help you clean it out," Finn offered, pushing the door open. Dust motes swirled in the shaft of sunlight that cut through the dimness. The cabin was indeed dirty, but Felicity could see the bones of it were good. A narrow bed frame stood against one wall, a cast iron stove occupied one corner, and a simple table with 2 chairs sat beneath the window. "I can manage," Felicity said, setting down the small bag that contained everything she owned in the world. "I am sure you can," Finn replied, "but that does not mean you should. Fair is fair. You would help me if I needed it, so I will help you now. Wait here." He disappeared before she could protest, leaving Felicity standing in the dusty cabin, blinking back tears she absolutely would not allow herself to shed. She had cried enough over the past few months. She had cried when Thomas died, though not for the reasons people assumed. She had cried when his parents kicked her out of their home, blaming her for their son's death as if she had been the one to put the bottle in his hand. She had cried when she realized she was pregnant and alone in a world that had no patience for women in her situation. But she was done crying. She had to be. Finn returned with his arms full. A broom, rags, a bucket, and behind him he dragged a mattress. "This one is from the spare room. It is better than the one out here. Help me get it on the frame." They worked in companionable silence, Finn doing most of the heavy lifting while Felicity swept and wiped down surfaces. He brought linens next, and a quilt his mother had made before she died. He brought a lamp with oil and a box of kitchen supplies, a pot, a pan, some plates and utensils, a coffee pot. "You are giving me too much," Felicity protested when he appeared with a rocking chair. "You will need it when the baby comes," Finn said simply, setting it by the window. "My mother used it for me and my sisters. It is just gathering dust in the attic." By the time they finished, The sun was setting and the cabin looked almost cozy. Felicity's back ached and her feet throbbed, but she felt something she had not felt in months: hope. It was a fragile, tentative thing, but it was there. "Come up to the main house for supper," Finn said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I've got stew left over from yesterday. It is not fancy, but it is filling." Felicity wanted to refuse, to maintain some boundary between employer and employee, but her stomach growled audibly, and she realized she had not eaten since morning. "Thank you." The inside of Finn's house surprised her. Despite the obvious bachelor neglect, there were signs of a life that had once been fuller. Photographs on the mantel showed a younger Finn with a couple who must have been his parents, and several women who shared his pale eyes and sharp cheekbones. Bookshelves lined one wall, actually full of books, which was rare in these parts. The furniture was worn but quality, and everything was arranged with a sense of order that spoke to someone who valued structure even if he had let some things slide. "Sisters?" Felicity asked, gesturing to the photographs as Finn ladled stew into bowls. "3 of them. All married now, living in different parts of the country. Mary is in California, Sarah is in Missouri, and Ruth is in Ohio. They wanted me to sell this place and come live near one of them, but I am not much for being dependent on family charity." He set a bowl in front of her along with a chunk of bread. "Besides, this land has been in my family for 15 years. My father built this house with his own hands. I am not giving it up easy." Felicity understood that kind of stubbornness. She had her own version of it, the kind that kept you moving forward even when logic suggested lying down and giving up would be easier. The stew was actually quite good, rich with beef and vegetables, and Felicity had to force herself to eat slowly. Finn ate across from her, his manners better than she expected. He used his napkin, did not talk with his mouth full, and offered her more when her bowl emptied. "Can I ask you something?" Finn said after a while. Felicity tensed. "I suppose. Why Council Bluffs? If you are alone and starting over, there are bigger towns with more opportunities." It was a fair question, and one that did not require her to reveal too much. "I have been moving west since my husband died. Started in Illinois. I worked where I could, saved what I could, and kept moving. I heard Iowa was settling down, becoming more civilized, thought it might be safer for raising a child than some of the rougher territories." "You heard right," Finn said. "The railroad came through a few years back, and that settled things down considerably. We still get drifters and troublemakers, but nothing like the old days. The law actually means something here now. What about you?" Felicity asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Why are you still here running this ranch alone? You look capable enough. You could hire on anywhere." Finn's expression shuddered slightly. "I was not always alone. I had help until recently, and before that I had a partner in this operation." "What happened to your partner?" "We had a disagreement about how things should be run. He bought out my share of the cattle and I kept the land. It was not a friendly parting." Finn stood abruptly, collecting their bowls. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow will come early." Felicity recognized a closed subject when she heard one. She stood, her body protesting after the long day. "Thank you for the meal, and for the cabin, and for the fairness." That last word hung in the air between them. Finn met her eyes, and something passed between them that neither could quite name. "It is just the right way to do things," he said quietly. "I have been on the wrong side of unfair too many times to inflict it on someone else." Those words stayed with Felicity as she walked back to her cabin in the gathering darkness. She lay in the bed that smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, her hand resting on her belly where the baby rolled and kicked. For the first time since Thomas died, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not just about survival. Maybe here, With this strange cowboy who believed in fairness, she could build something resembling a life. The next morning came early, as Finn had promised. Felicity woke to golden sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of a rooster crowing. She dressed quickly in one of her 2 work dresses, splashed water on her face from the basin Finn had provided, and made her way to the main house. Finn was already up, standing at the stove with his sleeves rolled up, attempting to flip flapjacks. He managed to get one onto a plate, but the next one folded in half and stuck to the pan. "I thought we were splitting chores," Felicity said from the doorway, making him jump. "I was just getting started," Finn defended, then looked at the mangled flapjack. "Though I will admit breakfast is not my strongest skill." "Move over," Felicity said, but there was amusement in her voice. "How about you handle the coffee and I handle the flapjacks?" They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side in the kitchen. Felicity made short work of the batter, producing a stack of perfectly golden flapjacks while Finn brewed coffee and set the table. They sat down to eat together, and Finn produced a jar of honey to drizzle over the flapjacks. "We should make a list," Felicity said between bites, "of all the chores that need doing regularly, then we can divide them up fairly." Finn nodded, retrieving a pencil and paper from a drawer. "All right. Cooking, we can alternate," Felicity suggested. "Or better yet, do it together like this morning. Faster that way. Fine by me. I am not much of a cook anyway. Cleaning, split it. I will do the kitchen and the upstairs, you do the front room and your bedroom." They went through the entire list. Laundry, gardening, tending the chickens, feeding the pigs, milking the cow, mending, firewood, maintaining the buildings, mucking stalls. Some tasks they divided evenly, others they assigned based on physical capability or skill. Finn took anything requiring heavy lifting or working with the larger animals. Felicity took the more detail-oriented tasks like mending and food preservation. "What about your ranch work?" Felicity asked. "Cattle, horses, all that." "I've got 30 head of cattle right now, down from 100 before the split with my partner. They are mostly out on the range, so they take care of themselves for now. Got 4 horses in the stable that need daily care. I can handle that myself. The big work will come in fall when I need to round them up and prepare for winter." "I can help with the horses," Felicity offered. "I grew up around them." Finn looked skeptical. "In your condition—" "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Felicity said with a touch of heat. "I can brush a horse and clean a stall." "Fair enough," Finn conceded, holding up his hands in surrender. "But if something feels like too much, you tell me. Deal, deal." They shook on it, and Felicity felt calluses on Finn's palm that matched her own. These were hands that knew work, that understood the value of labor and the dignity of earning one's keep. She found that reassuring in a way she could not quite articulate. The days fell into a pattern after that. They rose early and worked through the morning, broke for a midday meal, worked through the afternoon, and spent the evenings on lighter tasks or necessary repairs. Finn was true to his word about splitting things fairly, and Felicity found herself working hard but never feeling exploited. When her back ached or her feet swelled, Finn noticed and adjusted the division of labor without being asked, taking on extra tasks without making her feel weak or incapable. For his part, Finn found himself enjoying the company. He had been alone for too long, rattling around in a house built for a family, eating meals in silence, talking only to horses and chickens. Felicity was quiet by nature, but she had a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh. She was competent and intelligent, and she did not suffer fools. When a traveling salesman stopped by the ranch trying to sell them a miracle tonic, Felicity took one look at the ingredients list and drove him off with a blistering assessment of his character and his product's worthlessness. "Where did you learn to read labels like that?" Finn asked after the salesman's wagon disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust. "My father was a pharmacist before he died," Felicity said. "I learned from him. That tonic was mostly alcohol and sugar with some herbs thrown in for show. No different from whiskey, except it costs 3 times as much and tastes worse." Finn found himself curious about her past, about the life she had lived before showing up on his doorstep. But he sensed she was not ready to share those stories yet, and he respected that. He had his own secrets, his own wounds that had not quite healed. They could work together, could even become friends without spilling every painful detail of their histories. 3 weeks after Felicity arrived, Finn took the wagon into Council Bluffs for supplies. Felicity stayed behind to tend the garden and put up vegetables for canning. When Finn returned several hours later, he had more than just flour and sugar in the back of the wagon. "What is all this?" Felicity asked, coming out to help unload. "Fabric," Finn said, handing her several yards of soft cotton in a pale blue. "And this?" He produced a smaller package wrapped in brown paper. Felicity opened it to find yarn in various colors, knitting needles, and a pattern book. She stared at the items, then up at Finn, confused. "You will need things for the baby," Finn said, not quite meeting her eyes. "And you mentioned your dresses were wearing thin. I thought you could make yourself something new and maybe some baby clothes while you are at it. Consider it a bonus for all the good work you have been doing." "Finn, I cannot accept this." But even as she protested, Felicity's fingers stroked the soft fabric and her eyes lingered on the yarn. "It is not charity," Finn said firmly. "It is fair compensation. You have been working hard and the place looks better than it has in months. Besides, I got a good price on the fabric from Mrs. Harmon at the dry goods store. She said it had been sitting around too long and she wanted to clear inventory." Felicity suspected he was lying about the price, but she also knew better than to refuse when someone was trying to be kind in the only way they knew how. "Thank you. This is very generous." That evening, after supper, Felicity sat in the rocking chair in her cabin and began to knit. Her fingers remembered the motions even though it had been months since she had last held needles. She started with something simple, a small blanket in cream and yellow. As she worked, she allowed her mind to wander over the past few weeks, taking stock of this new life she was building. She had not expected to find peace here. She had expected work and safety and perhaps a temporary reprieve from the constant uncertainty that had defined her life since Thomas died. But what she had found was something more complicated. She had found a man who kept his word, who valued fairness even when it cost him, who looked at her and saw a person rather than a problem or an opportunity. It was dangerous, she knew, to let herself feel grateful. Gratitude could turn into dependence, and dependence made you vulnerable. But she could not help it. After years of being ground down by unfairness, by being used and discarded and blamed, Finn's simple decency felt like water in a desert. Inside the main house, Finn sat at his desk trying to balance his accounts and failing miserably. He kept losing his place in the columns, his mind drifting to the woman in the cabin outside. He told himself he was just being neighborly, just doing what any decent person would do. But he could not quite convince himself that was the whole truth. There was something about Felicity that got under his skin in a way he had not experienced in years. It was not just that she was pretty, though she was. It was her competence, her refusal to be pitied, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity despite her circumstances. It was the dry humor that occasionally broke through her careful reserve, and the way she looked at him sometimes, as if she could not quite believe he was real. He had been alone for 3 years now, ever since Emma left. Emma, who had promised to love him in sickness and health, who had fled the moment his father died and left him with debts he could barely comprehend. Emma, who had married a banker in Omaha within 6 months and never looked back. That betrayal had taught Finn to be cautious, to keep his heart guarded, to expect the worst from people. But Felicity was different. She had not asked him for promises or declarations. She had asked for fairness, for the simple dignity of honest work exchanged for honest compensation. And somehow, that made her more dangerous to his carefully constructed walls than Emma had ever been. Finn shook his head, trying to clear it. He was being foolish. Felicity was his employee, a pregnant widow who had nowhere else to go. She was not staying because she wanted to be with him. She was staying because she needed to survive. Anything else he imagined was just his own loneliness talking. Still, when he blew out his lamp that night and lay in the darkness listening to the sounds of the ranch settling, he found himself hoping she would stay long after the baby came. Not because he needed the help, though he did, but because the house felt less empty with her in it, because meals tasted better when shared, because fairness was easier to believe in when you had someone to be fair with. August arrived with oppressive heat that turned the prairie grass yellow and made the air shimmer like water. The Missouri River ran low, and dust became a constant companion, coating everything no matter how often they swept and wiped. Felicity's pregnancy became more obvious, her belly swelling until she had to let out the seams on her dress and walk with one hand pressed to her lower back. Finn found himself watching her more than he should, ready to step in if she needed help, but trying not to hover. She hated being treated as fragile, he had learned that quickly. But she also had limits, whether she wanted to admit them or not. He started doing more of the physical chores without announcing it, just casually taking over tasks before she could get to them. She noticed, of course. She was too observant not to. "You are breaking our agreement," she said one morning after he had already fed the chickens and brought in the eggs before she woke. "I am getting up earlier," Finn countered. "Can I help it if I am an early riser?" "You are getting up earlier because I am slowing down," Felicity said, but there was no accusation in her voice. "You do not need to do that." "I want to," Finn said simply. "Look, we made an agreement about splitting things fairly, but fair does not mean equal when circumstances change. You are 7 months pregnant now. It would not be fair to hold you to the same standards as when you first arrived. Fair means adjusting to reality." Felicity considered this, her hand absently rubbing circles on her belly. "And when the baby comes, what happens then?" It was a question Finn had been avoiding, even in his own thoughts. What would happen when Felicity no longer needed his help? When she was recovered and ready to move on to whatever came next in her life? "We will figure it out," he said, which was not really an answer at all. "You have got a place here as long as you need it. I am not going to turn you out with a newborn." Something in Felicity's expression softened. "You are a good man, Finn Beaumont." "I am just fair," Finn replied, but he felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. That afternoon, while Felicity rested in her cabin during the worst heat of the day, a rider appeared on the road. Finn watched from the porch as the man approached, his hand instinctively dropping to his revolver. You did not survive long in the West without being cautious about strangers. The rider was young, maybe early 20s, well-dressed in a city suit that looked absurdly out of place on horseback. He had the soft hands and pink cheeks of someone who had never done hard labor, and he sat his horse like he was afraid it might bite him. "Can I help you?" Finn called out, not bothering to hide his suspicion. "I am looking for Felicity Richardson," the young man said, his voice carrying the flat vowels of someone from back east. "I was told she might be working at this ranch." Every protective instinct Finn possessed roared to life. "Who is asking?" My name is Harold Richardson. I am her late husband's brother. He dismounted awkwardly, nearly losing his balance. I have been searching for her for some time. It is a family matter. Finn did not move from the porch. Mrs. Richardson is resting. The heat does not agree with her condition. Yes, well, that is part of why I am here. Harold straightened his jacket, trying to project an authority his soft appearance undermined. My family has certain responsibilities, certain standards to maintain. When we learned of Felicity's situation, we felt it was important to address things properly. Address things how? Finn's voice had gone cold. Well, clearly she cannot continue in her current circumstances. A woman in her condition, working as common labor, no family support. It reflects poorly on the Richardson name. We are prepared to take her back, provide for her and the child, assuming certain conditions are met. What conditions? Harold shifted uncomfortably. The child would be raised as a Richardson, naturally. Felicity would need to conduct herself appropriately, live according to our family's standards. We have a reputation to maintain in Springfield. Springfield, Illinois? Finn asked. That is a long way to come for someone your family kicked out. Harold's face flushed. There were misunderstandings. Emotions ran high after Thomas's death. My parents said things they did not mean. They blamed her for his drinking, Finn said flatly. They threw her out with nothing. How did you? Harold trailed off, then recovered. Look, the past is the past. What matters now is doing the right thing. Felicity is family, and the child is a Richardson. They belong with us. Finn descended from the porch slowly, closing the distance between them until he stood close enough to see Harold flinch. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to get back on your horse and ride back to town. If Mrs. Richardson wants to talk to you, she will send word. But you do not get to show up here making demands and deciding what is right for her. She makes her own choices. Now see here, Harold blustered. I have every right to speak with my sister-in-law. Not on my land you do not. Finn's hand rested on his revolver, a casual gesture that was nevertheless crystal clear in its implication. Ride out, Mr. Richardson. Come back if you are invited and not before. Harold's eyes widened as he realized he was being threatened. He opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He scrambled back onto his horse, nearly falling off the other side in his haste. Felicity will hear about this, he said, trying to salvage some dignity. She deserves to know her family wants her back. I will tell her you stopped by, Finn agreed. Now go. He watched until Harold disappeared down the road, then turned to find Felicity standing on the porch of her cabin, one hand pressed to the doorframe for support. How much did you hear? Finn asked. Enough. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. You should not have done that. He had no right to come here making demands. He is family. Family that threw you out pregnant and grieving. Finn climbed the steps to her cabin, stopping a respectful distance away. Or did I hear that wrong? Felicity sank into the rocking chair, suddenly looking exhausted. You heard right. When Thomas died, his parents blamed me, said if I had been a better wife, he would not have needed to drink. Said the baby was probably not even his, that I had trapped their son with lies. That is horseshit, Finn said bluntly. A ghost of a smile touched Felicity's lips. Eloquently put. So why would you even consider going back to them? Because maybe they really do regret what they said. Maybe they want to make amends, and because. She paused, her hand moving to her belly. Because I am about to have a child, Finn. A child who will need stability and security and a future. What can I offer on my own? A life of scraping by, working whatever jobs I can find, always one disaster away from ruin. At least with the Richardsons, my baby would have education, opportunities, a real chance at a good life. And what about you? Finn demanded. What kind of life would you have? Living with people who hate you, being reminded every day that you are only tolerated because of the child. It would not be about me. It would be about giving my baby the best chance. Finn crouched down so he was at eye level with her, his hands gripping the arms of the rocking chair. Listen to me. You are one of the strongest, most capable people I have ever met. You showed up here 6 months pregnant, alone, with nothing but determination, and you have worked your ass off ever since. You have never once complained or asked for special treatment. You have earned every bit of security you have here. Why would you give that up to go back to people who will spend every day making you feel small? Because maybe I am being selfish, Felicity whispered. Maybe I am putting my own pride ahead of what is best for my child. Or maybe you are smart enough to know that a child needs a mother who is respected and valued, not one who is treated like a burden. Finn gentled his voice. You have a place here, Felicity. Not out of charity or obligation, but because you belong here. You have made this place better just by being in it, and when that baby comes, you will both have a home here for as long as you want it. Felicity's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for too long. Why are you so good to me? Because fair is fair, Finn said softly. And you deserve better than what the Richardsons are offering. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his rough cheek. I am not going back to them. Good. They stayed like that for a moment, the air between them charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Then the baby kicked hard enough that Felicity gasped, breaking the spell. That one has got a strong foot, she said, laughing shakily. Takes after the mother, Finn replied, standing. You should rest. I will handle supper tonight. We are supposed to split things. Consider it my turn. Besides, I am making bacon and beans. Even I cannot ruin that. Felicity watched him walk back to the main house, her hand pressed to her belly where the baby continued its acrobatic routine. Something had shifted between them in the past few minutes. Some invisible line had been crossed. She was not sure what it meant or where it might lead, but for the first time since Thomas died, she felt something other than numb determination. She felt alive. She felt hopeful. And most terrifying of all, she felt the first stirrings of something that might be love. The next few weeks passed in a haze of heat and hard work. Felicity did not hear from Harold again, though Finn mentioned seeing him in town once, watching from across the street as Finn loaded supplies. There was something calculating in the younger man's gaze that Finn did not like, but Harold did not approach and eventually rode off. Felicity grew larger and more uncomfortable as August turned to September. The baby seemed to be running out of room, and she felt every movement as a sharp jab to her ribs or bladder. Sleeping became difficult, and she often woke to find herself standing at the window, looking toward the main house where a lamp burned late into the night in Finn's study. She knew he was struggling financially. She had seen the ledgers when cleaning, had noticed how thin the columns were getting. He never complained or mentioned it, but she understood. The ranch was barely breaking even, and having her here was an added expense he could not really afford. She tried to be useful in other ways, taking on extra cooking and preserving food for winter, mending every piece of clothing she could find, finding small economies wherever possible. One evening in mid-September, Finn found her in the garden picking tomatoes by moonlight. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, exasperated. "It is nearly 10 o'clock. I could not sleep, and I noticed these needed picking before they went bad." Felicity straightened slowly, one hand supporting her back. "I thought I would make relish tomorrow." "Come inside," Finn said, taking the basket from her. "You are going to exhaust yourself. I am fine. You are 8 months pregnant and picking vegetables in the dark. That is not fine, that is stubborn." "I am trying to earn my keep," Felicity snapped, the stress and discomfort making her irritable. "You have earned it 10 times over," Finn countered. "Now come inside before you give me a heart attack." They walked back toward the cabin, the silence between them tense. When they reached her door, Felicity turned to him. "I am scared," she admitted quietly. "The baby is coming soon, and I do not know what happens after that. I do not know if you will still want me here when I cannot work as hard. I do not know if I can support a child on my own. I do not know anything except that I am terrified." Finn set the basket down and took her hands in his. "Look at me." She did, her eyes luminous in the moonlight. "You are not alone," Finn said firmly. "When that baby comes, I will be here. We will figure it out together. You are not going to be cast out or abandoned or left to struggle alone. I give you my word." "Why?" Felicity whispered. "Why do you care so much?" Finn opened his mouth, then closed it again. There were things he wanted to say, feelings that had been growing since the day she walked into his life. But she was vulnerable right now, exhausted and scared, and it felt wrong to burden her with his emotions when she had so much else to worry about. "Because you matter," he said instead. "Because you have become important to me. Because I cannot imagine this place without you in it anymore." It was not a declaration of love, but it was close enough that Felicity's breath caught. She squeezed his hands, holding on like he was an anchor in a storm. "I should not stay," she said, even as she made no move to let go. "I am becoming dependent on you, and that is dangerous. But I do not want to leave." "Then do not leave," Finn said simply. "Stay, build a life here. Let me help you raise your child. Not because you owe me or because you have no choice, but because you want to. Because we make a good team. Because maybe we could be more than employer and employee if you wanted. More." Felicity's heart hammered against her ribs. "Friends, at least. Maybe more than that eventually if you were interested. I am not asking for anything right now," Finn added quickly. "You have got enough on your plate. I am just saying the possibility is there. If you want it." Felicity swayed forward, whether from exhaustion or emotion she could not say. Finn caught her automatically, and suddenly they were standing so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I am pregnant with another man's child," she said. "A man who was not kind to me, a man whose family hates me. I come with complications and baggage, and I cannot promise I will be easy to care about." "I do not want easy," Finn said. "I want honest, I want fair. I want someone who works as hard as I do and does not give up when things get difficult. You are all of those things, Felicity. The rest, we can handle together." She kissed him then, unable to help herself. It was soft and tentative, her swollen belly pressing against him awkwardly, but it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. Finn kissed her back gently, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I am a mess," Felicity said, laughing shakily. "You are beautiful," Finn corrected. "And stubborn and smart and exactly what I did not know I needed." "We should take this slow," Felicity said, even as every instinct screamed at her to hold on and never let go. "I need to have this baby and figure out what happens next. You need to be sure this is not just loneliness or some misguided protective instinct." "Fair enough," Finn agreed. "We will take it slow, but I am not changing my mind, Felicity. I know what I want, and I want you here, both of you." That night, Felicity lay in her bed and let herself imagine a future she had not dared to picture before. A future where she was not just surviving but thriving. Where her child grew up on this ranch, learning to ride horses and tend gardens and understand the value of honest work. Where Finn was not just her employer but her partner, her companion, maybe eventually her husband. It was a dangerous dream, she knew. So many things could go wrong. The baby could have complications. Finn could change his mind. The ranch could fail. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Felicity chose to hope instead of fear. She chose to believe that fairness could actually exist in the world, and that she had found it in the most unlikely place. 2 weeks later, Felicity went into labor. It started as a dull ache in her back that she initially dismissed as the usual pregnancy discomfort. She was in the garden again, pulling weeds in the cool morning air, when the first real contraction hit. It stopped her mid-reach, her breath hissing out between clenched teeth. Finn found her there 10 minutes later, leaning against the fence and breathing hard. "It is time," she said simply. To his credit, Finn did not panic. He helped her inside the cabin, got her settled on the bed, and then rode hard into Council Bluffs to fetch the midwife. By the time he returned with Mrs. O'Brien, a capable Irish woman who had delivered half the babies in the county, Felicity's contractions were coming every few minutes. "You have to leave," Mrs. O'Brien said, shooing Finn toward the door. "This is woman's work." "I am staying," Finn said flatly. "Unless Felicity wants me gone." Felicity, in the brief respite between contractions, shook her head. "Stay, please." Mrs. O'Brien muttered something about impropriety but did not argue further. She had seen too many births to waste energy on social conventions. The labor was long and hard. Felicity was strong, but this was her first child and it did not come easy. She labored through the afternoon and into the evening, Finn holding her hand and offering water and encouragement. He had never felt more useless in his life, watching her suffer and knowing he could do nothing to help beyond simply being there. As night fell and the contractions intensified, Felicity began to lose her grip on the calm determination she had been maintaining. "I cannot do this," she gasped between contractions. "It is too much." "You can," Finn said firmly, smoothing sweat-soaked hair back from her face. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." "You are almost there, love," Mrs. O'Brien added, checking her progress. "A few more big pushes and you will meet your baby." In the end, it was just after midnight when the baby came. A final push, a moment of terrible silence, and then a thin wail that filled the small cabin. Mrs. O'Brien worked quickly, cleaning and checking the infant while Felicity lay back, exhausted beyond measure. "It is a boy," Mrs. O'Brien announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket. "Small but healthy from what I can see, all fingers and toes accounted for." She placed the baby in Felicity's arms, and Finn watched as his partner, his friend, his love looked down at her son for the first time. The expression on her face was something he would remember for the rest of his life. Joy and terror and overwhelming love all mixed together. "Hello, little one," Felicity whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I am your mama." The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn brown. He had his mother's nose and a rosebud mouth that was already searching for food. "What will you name him?" Finn asked softly. Felicity looked up at him, including him in the moment. "I was thinking Samuel, my father's name." "Samuel Richardson," Mrs. O'Brien asked, preparing the paperwork she would file. "Samuel Beaumont," Felicity said, her eyes locked on Finn's, "if that would be all right." Finn felt something crack open in his chest. "You want to give him my name?" "I want him to have the name of a good man," Felicity said. "A fair man, a man who will raise him right if you are willing." "I am willing," Finn managed, his voice rough. "I am more than willing, Mrs. O'Brien looked between them, understanding dawning. "Well then, Samuel Beaumont it is. Born September 28, 1878, right here in Iowa. One of the easier births I have attended, all things considered. You did well, girl." She stayed long enough to make sure Felicity could nurse the baby and that there were no complications, then left with promises to check back in a few days. Finn walked her to her horse, pressing money into her hands despite her protests. "You came out in the middle of the night," he said. "It is only fair you are compensated well." "You are a good man, Finn Beaumont," Mrs. O'Brien said, echoing Felicity's words from weeks ago. "That woman and her baby are lucky to have you." "I think I am the lucky one," Finn replied. When he returned to the cabin, Felicity had managed to get Samuel latched and feeding. She looked up at Finn with exhausted eyes. "You should go get some rest," she said. "You have been up all night." "So have you," Finn pointed out. He dragged a chair next to the bed and sat down. "I am staying unless you want privacy." "No," Felicity said quickly. "Stay, I like having you here." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Samuel nurse with single-minded determination. Finn marveled at how tiny he was, how perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, as Mrs. O'Brien had said. A whole person, new to the world and completely dependent on them for everything. "Are you scared?" Finn asked. "Terrified," Felicity admitted. "I have no idea what I am doing. What if I mess this up?" "You will not," Finn said with absolute certainty. "You will make mistakes, we both will. But you love him, I can see it on your face. That is the most important part." "We," Felicity repeated softly. "You said we." "Well, you gave him my name. That makes him mine too, does it not, if you meant it?" "I meant it." Felicity's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. "I want him to have a father, Finn. A real father who will teach him and guide him and show him what a good man looks like. Thomas could not have done that even if he had lived, but you can." "I will do my best," Finn promised. "I will treat him like my own. He will never have reason to doubt he belongs here." Samuel finished nursing and promptly fell asleep, his tiny mouth still making sucking motions. Felicity handed him to Finn, who took the baby with shaking hands, terrified he would drop something so small and precious. But Samuel settled against his chest as if he belonged there, warm and solid and real. Finn looked down at the sleeping infant and felt his heart rearrange itself around this new person, making room for a love he had not anticipated. "We are a family now," Felicity said drowsily. "The 3 of us." "We are," Finn agreed. "Get some sleep. I will watch over him." Felicity drifted off within minutes, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. Finn sat with Samuel cradled in his arms, rocking gently and wondering how his life had changed so completely in just 4 months. He had been alone, struggling to keep his ranch afloat, certain he would never trust anyone enough to let them close again. And then Felicity had walked into his life asking for fairness, and everything had shifted. He looked at the woman sleeping in the bed, her face peaceful despite the ordeal she had just endured. He looked at the baby in his arms, this tiny person who had already claimed a piece of his heart. And he knew with absolute certainty that he would protect them both with his last breath. He would build a life with them, raise Samuel as his own, and show Felicity every day that fairness was not just a concept, but a reality they could create together. As dawn broke over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Finn made a silent promise to the sleeping baby. He would be the father Samuel deserved. He would teach him about hard work and honesty, about treating people fairly and standing up for what was right. He would make sure this boy never doubted he was loved and wanted, never questioned whether he belonged. And he would love Felicity, this fierce, stubborn, beautiful woman who had trusted him with her heart and her child. He would earn that trust every day for the rest of his life. The first weeks with a newborn were harder than either of them anticipated. Samuel was a good baby, but he needed constant care, waking every few hours to eat, requiring diaper changes and soothing and endless patience. Felicity recovered well physically, but the exhaustion of new motherhood left her drained in ways she had not expected. Finn stepped up without hesitation. He handled all the ranch chores alone, letting Felicity focus on caring for Samuel. He brought her meals and fresh water. He rocked Samuel when the baby fussed and Felicity needed a break. He changed diapers and cleaned spit up and did not complain once about any of it. "This is not fair to you," Felicity protested one afternoon, watching Finn bring in yet another load of laundry he had washed himself. "You are doing everything." "Fair changes with circumstances, remember?" Finn hung the clothes on the line strung across the cabin. "Right now, you need to rest and take care of Samuel. I can handle the rest. In a few weeks, when you are stronger, we will split things again." "What if I cannot work like I did before?" The fear that had been lurking beneath the surface finally broke through. "What if I cannot pull my weight anymore?" Finn stopped what he was doing and came to sit beside her on the bed. Samuel was sleeping in a drawer they had repurposed as a cradle, completely oblivious to his mother's distress. "Listen to me," Finn said, taking her hands. "You are pulling your weight. You are raising a child. That is the hardest, most important work there is. Everything else, the ranch work and the chores, that is just stuff. It will get done or it will not. But Samuel needs you, and that is not something anyone else can do." "You do it," Felicity pointed out. "You are good with him." "I help," Finn corrected. "But I am not his mother. You are. And when he is older and we are splitting chores again, we will make sure child raising is factored into the division. Maybe I do more of the heavy work and you do more of the child rearing, or maybe we find some other balance. But we will figure it out together, fairly." Felicity leaned her head on his shoulder, allowing herself the comfort of his solid presence. "I do not deserve you." "That is backwards," Finn said. "I am the one who does not deserve you. You are raising a child and still worrying about being fair to me. Most people would just take what they could get and not think twice." "I am not most people." "No," Finn agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You are not." As September turned to October, they fell into a new rhythm. Felicity grew stronger, able to take on more tasks while still caring for Samuel. Finn continued to handle the heaviest work, but they began splitting cooking and cleaning again. Samuel proved to be an adaptable baby, content to nap in a basket in the garden while Felicity weeded, or to watch from a blanket on the floor while they prepared meals. The ranch began to recover too. With Felicity's careful management of resources and Finn's hard work, they made it through harvest season with enough stored food for winter and even a small profit from selling produce in town. It was not much, but it was progress. One evening in late October, after Samuel had been settled for the night, Finn and Felicity sat on the porch of the main house sharing a pot of coffee. The air had turned crisp, carrying the first hint of the winter to come. "I have been thinking," Finn said, staring out at the darkening prairie, "about making some changes around here." "What kind of changes?" Felicity asked, pulling her shawl tighter. "I want to expand the vegetable operation. We made good money on produce this year, more than I expected. If we put in more garden beds next spring, maybe build a greenhouse for extending the season, we could make a real go of it. People in Council Bluffs are willing to pay for fresh vegetables, and with the railroad, we could potentially ship to Omaha." Felicity's mind was already racing with possibilities. "We would need to put up more preserves too. Canned goods sell well, and we could do pickles, relish, jams. I know how to make all of that." "Exactly. And I was thinking if we do this right, we could hire some help next year. A few seasonal workers during planting and harvest. That would take some pressure off us and let us grow even more." "That sounds like a partnership, not an employer-employee relationship," Felicity said carefully. "It does," Finn agreed. He turned to face her. "Which is why I think we should make it official. A real partnership, Felicity. Equal shares in the ranch, equal say in decisions, equal profits. We build this together as partners." "Finn, I cannot accept that. This is your land, your family's legacy. I cannot just walk in and claim half of it. You are not claiming anything. I am offering. You have worked as hard as I have to keep this place going. You have earned a stake in it. And more than that, I want you to have security. I want you to know that this is your home, that you have a say in what happens here, that you are not dependent on my goodwill or generosity. You are my partner in every way that matters. The paperwork should reflect that. Felicity felt tears prick her eyes. That is the fairest thing anyone has ever offered me. Then say yes. Yes, Felicity whispered, but on one condition. What condition? We expand the operation like you said, but we also set aside money for Samuel's future. Education, opportunities, whatever he needs. And if we hire workers, we pay them fairly and treat them well. We build something here that is based on fairness from top to bottom. No exploiting people, no taking advantage of desperation. We do things right. Finn smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his weathered face. I would not have it any other way. We have got a deal, partner. They shook hands formally, then laughed at the absurdity of it. But the moment felt important, like they were building something bigger than just a business arrangement. They were creating a philosophy, a way of living that honored fairness and dignity and mutual respect. As November arrived with cold winds and the first hints of snow, Finn and Felicity finalized their partnership. They went to Council Bluffs together and had a lawyer draw up papers that made Felicity an equal owner in the ranch. She signed her name carefully, Felicity Richardson Beaumont, a hyphenation that felt like a promise of things to come. The lawyer, a shrewd man named Thompson, looked at them over his spectacles. This is an unusual arrangement. These are unusual times, Finn replied. And Mrs. Richardson Beaumont is an unusual woman. Indeed. Thompson stamped the papers and filed them away. Well, congratulations on your partnership. I hope it proves profitable for you both. Walking back to the wagon with Samuel bundled in Felicity's arms, Finn felt lighter than he had in years. They had started as employer and employee, had become friends, had evolved into something more profound. Now they were partners in every sense, building a future together based on the simple radical concept of fairness. "What are you thinking?" Felicity asked, noticing his expression. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man in Iowa," Finn said honestly. "And I am thinking that I love you." "I should probably say that. I love you, Felicity. I have for a while now, but it did not feel right to say it when you were vulnerable or dependent on me. But now we are partners, equals. So I can say it without you worrying that I am trying to manipulate you or that you owe me anything. I love you." Just because. Felicity stopped walking. Samuel chose that moment to wake and fuss, but she ignored him, her full attention on Finn. "I love you too," she said. "I have been afraid to say it, afraid it was just gratitude or relief or some trauma bond that would fade. But it is not any of those things. It is real. You are the best man I have ever known, Finn Beaumont. You showed me what fairness looks like, what respect looks like, what love should look like, and I love you for all of it." Finn kissed her there on the main street of Council Bluffs, with Samuel squirming between them and a few passers-by giving them curious looks. He kissed her like she was oxygen, and he had been drowning. He kissed her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and grinning like fools. "So what happens now?" Felicity asked. "Now we go home," Finn said. "We raise Samuel. We build our partnership, we make the ranch thrive. And eventually, when you are ready, maybe we make this official in other ways too. Marriage if you want it. More children if you want them. A whole life together, built on fairness and love and mutual respect." "That sounds perfect," Felicity said. "That sounds like everything I never knew I wanted." They drove home through the cold November afternoon, Samuel sleeping between them on the wagon seat. The prairie stretched out in all directions, brown and dormant but full of potential. Next spring would bring new life, new growth, new possibilities. They would plant their expanded gardens and tend their livestock and build their business together. But more than that, they would build a family. Not the traditional kind that started with a wedding and followed all the expected patterns, but a family born out of fairness and kindness, out of seeing each other clearly and choosing to stay anyway. A family built on partnership and respect, and the radical notion that people deserve to be treated with dignity regardless of their circumstances. Winter came on hard that year. Snow fell early and heavy, blanketing the prairie in white and trapping them on the ranch for days at a time. But Finn and Felicity had prepared well, and their stores held. They spent the long evenings together in the main house, Finn reading aloud while Felicity knitted, and Samuel played on a blanket at their feet on Christmas Eve, with snow falling softly outside and a fire crackling in the hearth. Finn pulled out a small wooden box. "I made this," he said, suddenly nervous. "I am not a skilled woodworker, but I wanted you to have something." Inside the box was a simple gold ring, not expensive or ornate, just a plain band that Finn had saved for and purchased on one of his trips to town. "Felicity Richardson Beaumont," Finn said formally, dropping to one knee in front of her chair. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because you need to, not because it makes practical sense, but because I love you and I want to spend my life with you. I want to raise Samuel together and maybe have more children if we are blessed that way. I want to be your husband and your partner and your friend until the day I die. Will you marry me?" Felicity looked down at this good man, this fair man, this man who had given her everything without asking for anything in return. She thought about how far she had come, from desperate and alone to secure and loved. She thought about the future they were building together, based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I will marry you, Finn Beaumont. I will be your wife and your partner and your friend. I will raise Samuel with you and build this life with you. Yes, to all of it." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him up for a kiss that was witnessed only by Samuel, who babbled happily from his blanket, delighted by the celebration he did not understand. They were married in February of 1879, in a simple ceremony at the church in Council Bluffs. Finn's sisters could not make the journey in winter, but they sent letters full of congratulations and promises to visit in spring. Mrs. O'Brien attended, along with a few neighbors who had come to respect the hard-working couple. Samuel, now 4 months old, slept through the entire ceremony in Mrs. O'Brien's arms. Felicity wore a new dress made from the fabric Finn had bought her months ago, the pale blue cotton transformed into something simple but beautiful. Finn wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed for the occasion. They exchanged vows in front of the small congregation, promising to love and honor each other, to be partners in all things, to build a life based on fairness and mutual respect. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Finn kissed his bride like he meant it, and the small church erupted in applause. The reception was held at their ranch, despite the cold. Neighbors brought food and drink, and someone produced a fiddle for dancing. Felicity danced with Finn in the front room of the main house, Samuel sleeping upstairs, and felt happiness so profound it was almost painful. "What are you thinking?" Finn murmured as they swayed together. "I am thinking about the day I showed up here," Felicity said. "How desperate I was, how certain I was that life would never be anything but a struggle. And now look at us. Married, partners, building something real together." "Best day of my life was when you walked up to my door asking for work," Finn said. "I just did not know it yet." "I offered to do all the chores," Felicity remembered. "I was ready to work myself to death just for a place to sleep." "And I said we would split things down the middle," Finn said. "Fairest thing I ever did. Led me right to you." They kissed, long and deep, while their friends and neighbors danced around them. Outside, the prairie lay cold and dormant under its blanket of snow. But inside, there was warmth and love and the promise of spring. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch prospered under their joint management. The expanded vegetable operation proved successful, and they added chickens for eggs and a few dairy cows for milk and cheese. They hired seasonal workers as planned, paying fair wages and providing good working conditions, and developed a reputation as fair employers who treated people with respect. Samuel grew from a baby into a toddler, then a young boy. He had his mother's determination and his adoptive father's sense of fairness. By the time he was 3, he was following Finn around the ranch, mimicking his every move and insisting on helping with chores even when his help mostly consisted of getting in the way. In the spring of 1881, Felicity discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear or uncertainty, only joy. She and Finn had built a stable life, a real home, and they were ready to expand their family. Their daughter was born in October, a healthy baby girl they named Faith. She had Finn's pale green eyes and Felicity's determination, and Samuel was instantly smitten with his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to choosing which blanket she should use. 2 years later came another son, Thomas Finn Beaumont, named for both of Felicity's fathers in a way. The one who had raised her and taught her about medicine, and the one who had shown her what it meant to be loved fairly. Little Thomas was quieter than his siblings, content to observe the world with serious eyes before joining in. The main house rang with noise and laughter. Meals were chaotic affairs with children talking over each other and food ending up in unexpected places. Bedtimes became negotiations as Samuel tried to stay up just a little longer, and Faith refused to sleep without her favorite doll. Finn and Felicity split the child rearing as they split everything else, fairly and with humor. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch after the children had been put to bed, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sun set over the prairie. 5 years, Felicity marveled. Sometimes it feels like forever, and sometimes it feels like just yesterday. Any regrets? Finn asked, though his tone suggested he knew the answer. Not a single one, Felicity said honestly. Well, maybe I regret not finding you sooner. Think of all the years we could have had together. We have got plenty of years ahead of us, Finn pointed out. And every day I wake up grateful that you walked up to my door that July afternoon. Because I offered to work hard, Felicity teased. Because you asked for fairness, Finn corrected. Because you saw me as someone who might treat you right, and you were brave enough to take a chance. That took courage, Felicity. You were 6 months pregnant and alone, and you still demanded to be treated with dignity. I admired that from the first moment. Felicity leaned her head on his shoulder. You gave me more than fairness. You gave me a home, a family, a future. You taught me that not all men use strength to control. Some use it to protect and support. You taught me what love should look like. We taught each other, Finn said. You taught me that fairness is not weakness, that treating people right does not make you a fool. That partnership is stronger than dominance. We built this together, Felicity. Everything we have, we made it as a team. Fair is fair, Felicity quoted, using his phrase. Fair is fair, Finn agreed. As the stars came out over the Iowa prairie, they sat together in comfortable silence. Inside the house, their children slept safely. In the barn, the animals were settled for the night. In the fields, next spring's crops waited to be planted. Everything they had built together, everything they had created through hard work and mutual respect and fairness, stretched out around them like a promise kept. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man who understood from his earliest memories that fairness was not just a concept, but a way of life. Faith became a fierce advocate for the underdogs, always ready to stand up for anyone being treated unfairly. Young Thomas developed a quiet strength that reminded everyone of his father, combined with his mother's sharp intelligence. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1890, they had expanded their operations significantly, now shipping vegetables and preserved goods as far as Chicago. They employed a dozen workers during peak season, all paid fair wages with good working conditions. People came from all over the county hoping to work for the Beaumonts, knowing they would be treated with respect and dignity. Finn and Felicity became known throughout the region as fair dealers and good neighbors. When other ranchers struggled, the Beaumonts were quick to offer help, whether it was lending equipment, sharing knowledge, or providing temporary work. When the town needed funds for a new school, they were among the largest donors. When immigrants arrived looking for opportunities, the Beaumonts helped them get established, offering advice and sometimes starter loans that they did not expect to be repaid. "You are too generous," Finn's sister Mary said during a visit in 1892. "You will give away everything you have built." "We cannot take it with us," Finn replied, "and we have more than enough. Why not help others have a fair shot at building their own success?" "Because most people will take advantage," Mary argued. "Some will," Felicity agreed, "but most will not. Most people just need a fair chance, Mary. They need someone to believe in them and give them the opportunity to prove themselves. That is all I needed when I showed up here pregnant and desperate. Finn gave me that chance, and look what we built together." Mary had to concede the point. Her brother's ranch was thriving in ways their father could never have imagined. More than that, Finn seemed genuinely happy in a way he had not been during his brief first marriage. He and Felicity worked together like a well-oiled machine, anticipating each other's needs, supporting each other's decisions, raising their children with a unified philosophy that emphasized fairness and kindness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Finn surprised Felicity with a trip to Omaha. They left the children with Mrs. O'Brien, who had become like family over the years, and took the train to the city for a weekend alone. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at restaurants where someone else did the cooking, and walked the city streets hand in hand like young lovers. On their last night, they attended a theater performance, something neither had done in years. "This has been wonderful," Felicity said as they walked back to the hotel under the gaslights. "But I miss the children. Is that terrible? We have only been gone 2 days and I miss them." "I miss them too," Finn admitted. "Samuel is probably running Mrs. O'Brien ragged with questions. Faith is definitely getting into some kind of mischief. And Thomas is probably following his siblings around trying to keep them out of trouble." "We raised good kids," Felicity said proudly. "We did," Finn agreed. "Because we showed them what fairness looks like. They see how we treat each other, how we treat our workers, how we treat our neighbors. They are learning that success is not about climbing over other people. It is about lifting others up alongside you." Back at their hotel room, they stood at the window looking out over the city lights. "You ever think about how different life would be if I had not stopped at your ranch that day?" Felicity asked. "If I had kept walking, found work somewhere else?" "All the time," Finn said honestly. "And it terrifies me. The thought of you struggling alone, of Samuel growing up without a father, of me spending the rest of my life bitter and alone. We were both saved that day, Felicity. You saved me as much as I saved you. Fair is fair, Felicity said with a smile. We saved each other. They made love that night with the urgency of people who understood how precious their connection was, how easily things could have gone differently. Afterward, lying tangled together in the hotel bed, Felicity traced patterns on Finn's chest. I want more, she said quietly. More what? Finn asked, his fingers combing through her hair. More everything. More years together. More children if we are blessed. More building and growing and creating. I want to be 80 years old still running our ranch with you, still arguing about the fair way to divide chores, still falling asleep beside you every night. That sounds perfect, Finn said, though I am not sure I will still be able to handle heavy ranch work at 80. Then we will split the lighter work fairly, Felicity said. Figure it out together like we always do. They returned home to chaos. Samuel had indeed driven Mrs. O'Brien to distraction with his endless questions about agriculture and commerce. Faith had organized the neighborhood children into some kind of elaborate game that had resulted in mud tracked through 3 houses. Thomas had tried to mediate and ended up covered in mud himself. Your children are wonderful but exhausting, Mrs. O'Brien said, gratefully accepting payment for her babysitting services. I do not know how you two manage every day. We split things fairly, Finn and Felicity said in unison, then laughed at themselves. The 1890s brought changes. The country was modernizing rapidly, and even rural Iowa felt the effects. Telephones came to Council Bluffs, and the Beaumonts were among the first ranchers to have one installed. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, though horses remained more practical for ranch work. The children attended a proper school now, riding into town each day with the neighbor kids. Samuel, at 15, began talking about agricultural college. He wanted to learn modern farming techniques and bring them back to improve the ranch. Faith, at 13, declared she wanted to be a lawyer so she could fight for people who were treated unfairly. Thomas, at 11, was still figuring out his path, but showed a talent for mathematics that suggested he might become an accountant or banker. Finn and Felicity encouraged all of them, setting aside money for their educations and supporting their dreams. They never told their children they could not pursue something because of gender or circumstance. If Faith wanted to be a lawyer, they would find a way to make it happen, even if it meant sending her to one of the few schools that admitted women. If Samuel wanted to learn new techniques that challenged the old ways, they would listen with open minds. You are raising revolutionaries, one of their neighbors said, half joking. We are raising fair-minded people, Felicity corrected. People who will not accept the status quo just because that is how things have always been done. People who will question and challenge and make the world a little bit better. In 1899, as the new century approached, the Beaumonts hosted a large party at their ranch. They invited workers past and present, neighbors, friends from town, and family from out of state. It was part celebration of the new century and part gratitude for the life they had built together. Finn stood to give a toast as the sun set on the last day of the old century. 21 years ago, he began, a pregnant woman showed up at my door asking for work. She offered to do everything, to work herself ragged, just for a safe place to stay. And I said something that changed both our lives. I said we would split the chores down the middle. Fair is fair. Murmurs of agreement and some laughter rippled through the crowd. I had not heard fair in years, Finn continued. I had forgotten what it felt like to treat someone with genuine respect and expect the same in return, but Felicity reminded me. She reminded me that fairness is not weakness, it is strength. That partnership is stronger than dominance. That when you treat people right, everyone prospers. He turned to Felicity, who stood beside him with silver threads now visible in her dark blonde hair, her hand resting on his arm. "You have given me 21 years of partnership, love, and fairness," Finn said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have given me 3 incredible children and a life richer than I ever imagined possible. You showed up asking for fairness, and you taught me what it really means. Thank you." Felicity kissed him as the crowd applauded. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "Fair is fair," she said, "and fair is what we built here together." The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and stories told around the fire. Children ran through the darkness chasing lightning bugs. Adults shared memories and made plans for the new century. And through it all, Finn and Felicity moved together, partners in every sense, still splitting their time and attention fairly between guests and family and each other. As midnight approached, marking the turn of the century, they gathered everyone outside. Samuel had rigged up some fireworks, legal enough to not cause trouble but spectacular enough to mark the occasion. As the clock struck 12, and the fireworks burst overhead, painting the prairie sky in brilliant colors, Finn pulled Felicity close. "Here is to the 20th century," he whispered in her ear. "May it be as good to us as the last part of the 19th. "Here is to fairness," Felicity replied, "to partnership and love and building something that lasts." "To us," Finn said. "To us," Felicity agreed. They kissed as the fireworks exploded above them, and their children cheered, and the future stretched out bright and full of promise. They had started with nothing but determination and a radical commitment to fairness. They had built a life, a family, a legacy that would outlast them both. Years continued to pass in the pattern they had established. Samuel went to agricultural college and returned with new ideas that helped the ranch prosper even more. Faith became one of the first women to attend law school in the state, eventually opening a practice in Council Bluffs that specialized in defending workers' rights. Thomas became a banker, but one known for giving fair loans to people others considered too risky, helping dozens of families establish their own farms and businesses. All 3 children married and had children of their own, bringing their families back to the ranch for holidays and celebrations. The main house rang with the laughter of grandchildren who learned at their grandparents' knees about fairness and dignity and treating people right. Finn and Felicity grew old together, their hair turning silver, their bodies moving slower but their minds still sharp. They still split the chores, adjusting the division as needed to accommodate aging joints and changing capabilities. Finn took on less of the heavy work, hiring younger men to handle that. Felicity let her daughters-in-law help more with the cooking for large gatherings, though she still insisted on making her special preserves herself. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, their children threw them a massive party. People came from all over Iowa to celebrate the couple who had become legendary for their fairness and generosity. Former workers brought their own families, eager to introduce their children to the people who had given them their start. Neighbors who had received help during hard times came to express gratitude. Even a few of the immigrants the Beaumonts had sponsored years ago returned to show how well they had done. "You two changed a lot of lives," Samuel said during his toast. "You showed us all what is possible when people treat each other fairly and build partnerships based on mutual respect. You created something here that is bigger than just a ranch. You created a philosophy, a way of living that has spread out to touch hundreds of people. We are all better for knowing you." Finn and Felicity stood together, holding hands as they had for 40 years, and looked out at the crowd of people whose lives they had touched. It was overwhelming and humbling and deeply satisfying. "We just did what was right," Finn said simply. We treated people fairly and expected the same in return. It is not complicated. But it is rare, Faith added. Fair is rare, Dad. You and Mom made it common here in this place with these people. That is your legacy. As the celebration wound down and the guests departed, Finn and Felicity found themselves alone on their porch, watching the sun set as they had countless times before. 40 years, Felicity marveled. We have been married for 40 years. Best 40 years of my life, Finn said. Though I am including the 4 months before we got married too. That is when I fell in love with you. When exactly did you know? Felicity asked, a question she had never quite posed before. Finn thought about it. When you kissed me that night. When you were 8 months pregnant and terrified about the future, and you kissed me anyway. That is when I knew for certain. Though I think I started falling the day you showed up demanding fairness. That took courage and principle, and I admired it immediately. I knew when you helped me clean the cabin, Felicity said. When you brought me that rocking chair and said I would need it for the baby. You were thinking about my future, about my child's future, and including yourself in it without even realizing it. That is when I knew you were different, that maybe I had found someone who would actually treat me right. I hope I have, Finn said quietly. Treated you right, I mean. I know I have not always been perfect. You have been fair, Felicity said. You have been honest and kind, and you have treated me as an equal partner in every way. That is all I ever wanted, Finn. Fairness. And you gave me that plus so much more. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren settling down for the night, visiting families sleeping in every available room. The ranch was full of life and love, exactly as they had always hoped it would be. You think we will make it to 50 years? Finn asked. If we split the work of staying alive fairly, Felicity replied with a smile. You keep your heart healthy, I will keep mine healthy. We will take care of each other and meet in the middle. Fair is fair, Finn said. Fair is fair, Felicity agreed. They did make it to 50 years. Their golden wedding anniversary in 1929 was a quieter affair, both of them now in their late 70s and moving slower. But their minds were still sharp and their love still strong. They renewed their vows in the same church where they had first married, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. 50 years ago, the preacher said, you two made a commitment to each other. Not just to love, though you have certainly done that, but to build a partnership based on fairness and mutual respect. You have honored that commitment every day for half a century. You have shown this community, this state, what is possible when people treat each other with genuine dignity. You are an inspiration to us all. Finn and Felicity exchanged new rings, simple bands to replace the ones worn thin from 50 years of wear. They kissed, and the church erupted in applause that lasted several minutes. At the reception, Finn pulled Felicity onto the dance floor despite his protesting joints. They moved slowly, carefully, but with the same connection they had always shared. I am so glad you walked up to my door that day, Finn said. So grateful you were brave enough to ask for fairness. I am grateful you were brave enough to give it to me, Felicity replied. You changed my life, Finn Beaumont. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Finn corrected. Fair is fair, remember. We built this life together as partners. They danced until Finn's knees gave him trouble and Felicity's hips started to ache. Then they sat and watched their family dance, watched the legacy they had created moving through the world. Samuel and his wife, running the ranch now with the same principles of fairness his parents had instilled. Faith and her husband, defending workers' rights in her law practice and raising their own children to value justice. Thomas and his wife, running their bank with an eye toward giving people fair opportunities rather than exploiting them. "We did good," Felicity said, squeezing Finn's hand. "We did very good," Finn agreed. 2 years later, Finn fell ill. It was his heart, the doctor said, worn out from a long life of hard work. He had maybe a few months, maybe less. Finn took the news with the same calm acceptance he had shown throughout his life. "We knew this day would come eventually," he said to Felicity. "I am just grateful we got as much time as we did." "It is not enough," Felicity said fiercely. "I want more time. I want another 50 years. "I know, my love, but fair is fair. We got our time and it was good. Now I am ready to rest." Those final months were hard but also sweet. The family gathered, taking turns sitting with Finn and Felicity. They shared stories and memories, laughed at old jokes, and sometimes just sat in comfortable silence. Finn gave each of his children and grandchildren private time to say goodbye, offering wisdom and love and encouragement. To Samuel, "Keep the ranch going with the same principles we established. Treat your workers fairly and the land will provide." To Faith, "Keep fighting for people who need someone in their corner. Fairness does not happen automatically. It requires people like you to make it real." To Thomas, "Use your position to help people build their own success. Money is power, but how you use that power determines what kind of person you are." To all of them, "Take care of your mother. She is the strongest person I have ever known, but she will need you in the days ahead." On a cold January morning in 1931, with Felicity holding his hand and his children gathered around his bed, Finn Beaumont took his last breath. He went peacefully, a slight smile on his face, his last word a whispered, "Fair." Felicity felt something break inside her chest, but she held herself together long enough to close his eyes and press a kiss to his forehead. "Fair is fair, my love. You earned your rest, but I will miss you every day." The funeral was enormous. People came from across the state to pay their respects to a man who had touched so many lives through simple fairness and genuine kindness. Former workers stood beside wealthy ranchers, all equal in their grief and respect. The church could not hold everyone, so they held the service outside on a cold but clear winter day. Felicity stood strong through it all, accepting condolences with grace and dignity. But that night, alone in the house they had shared for 52 years, she finally allowed herself to break. She sobbed into the pillow that still smelled faintly of him, her heart shattered by the loss of her partner, her friend, her love. Samuel found her the next morning, pale and exhausted but composed. "He was a good man," Samuel said simply. "The best man," Felicity corrected. "He showed me what fairness really means. He taught me that I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, and then he spent 52 years proving it every single day." "What will you do now?" Samuel asked gently. Felicity looked around the house, at the photographs on the mantel showing their life together, at the furniture they had chosen as a couple, at the legacy they had built. "I will keep going," she said firmly. "Your father and I were partners. Even though he is gone, I still honor that partnership by living the way we agreed to live. Fairly, with dignity, treating people right. That does not end just because he is not physically here anymore." And she did keep going. Felicity lived another 5 years, remaining active in the ranch operations and the community. She advocated for workers' rights alongside Faith, consulted with Thomas on fair lending practices, and helped Samuel navigate the difficulties of the Depression, while maintaining their commitment to treating workers well, even when money was tight. She told stories to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about their grandfather, about the day she had shown up pregnant and desperate asking for work, about how he had offered to split the chores down the middle when no one had offered her fairness in years. Fair is fair became the family motto, words the children learned before they could even fully understand what they meant. In the spring of 1936, at the age of 84, Felicity fell asleep in the rocking chair Finn had given her all those years ago and simply did not wake up. She went peacefully, a smile on her face, her hand resting over her heart as if holding something precious. They buried her next to Finn in the cemetery outside Council Bluffs, under a large oak tree. The headstone read simply, Felicity Richardson Beaumont, 1852, 1936 partner, mother, advocate for fairness. Fair is fair. The ranch continued under Samuel's management, and eventually his children, carrying on the principles Finn and Felicity had established. The story of the pregnant woman who demanded fairness and the cowboy who gave it to her became legend in Iowa, told and retold as an example of what was possible when people treated each other with genuine dignity and respect. Future generations built on that foundation, expanding the definition of fairness to include civil rights, workers' protections, and social justice. The Beaumont Ranch became known not just for successful farming, but for its commitment to doing things the right way, treating people fairly, and building partnerships based on mutual respect. The small cabin where Felicity had lived when she first arrived was preserved and eventually turned into a small museum telling the story of how fairness had changed 2 lives and created a legacy that touched hundreds more. School children visited to learn about partnership and dignity. Young couples starting out came to hear the story and find inspiration for building their own fair relationships. And through it all, the words Finn had spoken that first day echoed forward through time. If you are going to work for me, it needs to be fair. You do half the chores, I do the other half. We split things down the middle, simple words. But they had contained the seeds of everything that followed. A partnership built on fairness, a love built on respect, a family built on dignity, a legacy built on the radical notion that everyone deserves to be treated right. Fair is fair. It was true in 1878 when a pregnant widow showed up desperate and alone. It remained true decades later as their children and grandchildren carried on their work. And it would remain true for as long as people remembered the story of Finn and Felicity Beaumont, who proved that fairness was not just an ideal but a way of life that could transform everything it touched. Their story ended, as all stories must. But the principles they lived by, the fairness they championed, the love they built together, those things endured. They endured in the ranch that still operated on principles of fair treatment and mutual respect. They endured in the descendants who carried forward their commitment to justice and dignity. They endured in the community that had been shaped by their example. And they endured in the simple truth that had started it all. When you treat people fairly, when you split things down the middle, when you build partnerships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation, everyone wins. Everyone prospers. Everyone gets the chance to build something beautiful. Fair is fair. It was the first thing Finn had offered Felicity. It became the foundation of their love, the principle that guided their lives, and the legacy that outlasted them both. And in the end, it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.